want to take you on a bit of a mental journey to start with. So I want you to all sit back, relax, and think back to what you had for lunch. Now, that might seem a long time ago, it was a few hours ago. So just think back to what you had for lunch. Now, like me, you may have rushed some lunch and grabbed something from a shop on the way here, but even so, think about it and think about what it looked like, and most importantly, think about how it was made. Is everyone doing that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good skills. Right. Now, some of you, not many in this heat, may have been to a gourmet burger outlet like Five Guys or one of its many competitors, which in and around the Leicester Square area, there are probably about 50 of these. Now, some of you may have gone there for lunch, some of you may be going there for dinner, and you wouldn't be alone. The gourmet burger market in the UK was estimated to be worth £3.28 billion last year. Now, on the screen is a picture of the kitchen. Now, it looks like chaos, but it's not. Every single person in this kitchen has a specific job. Someone's on buns, someone's on cheese, someone's on mushrooms, someone's cooking the burger, someone's bagging it up and shouting out the numbers so people can get their order. So basically what happens is you're served with this. A gourmet experience, something that takes you on a delectable journey. And quite rightly so. Just imagine if your burger came out in parts. So you got your roll, then you got your cheese, then you got your onion, and then you got your burger. That would not be a good experience, would it? Would it? No. Some people are going, that sounds great. Now, that wouldn't be a great experience, and I can guarantee you that the gourmet burger market would not be worth £3.28 billion a year in the UK. So, my question to you is, why do we do that when it comes to talent and people? We don't like to eat a series of processes. We like to have a whole thing, to go on that kind of journey, to have that sense of whole. But when it comes to talent and people, we're very, very disjointed. We're very, very disorganized. So you have recruitment, you have onboarding, you have retention, you have development, all looked after by different people, a series of different processes that as an employee, you have done to you. There's no sense of experience or journey there. And think about the company you may work at now, or companies that you've worked at in the past, where your experience of being delivered to by HR or recruiting really hasn't been top-notch. Now, what's interesting, lots of smart companies these days are focusing very hard on the employee experience. And the employee experience, I think, is something that we'll hear more and more about in the coming months and in the coming years. Now, why are smart companies doing it? For this reason. So, I've worked in this industry for quite some time, quite a long time now, and I still always seem to be on stage talking about skill shortages and all this kind of stuff. But I can absolutely, honestly say I've never seen anything like the way it is now. So from talking to clients, from doing the research that I do, it seems that we've got kind of massive issues around skills. Now, these are driven by people not having the right skills, changes in the workforce, digital transformation, changing the way that companies operate, and also changes and pressures on immigration, which means that this kind of skills crisis isn't just in the UK, it's essentially all over the world. So, how can you take employee experience and use it to deal with this skills crisis? And it's really important that you find a way to solve it, because they're going to be winners and they're going to be losers. And it's really important that your organizations or the organizations that you recruit for, really win in terms of these skill shortages to get the right talent to your businesses at the right time. So, Recently, I co-authored and researched a book with my very good friend Mervyns, and we were looking at this problem. We were looking at how do people get exceptional talent to their organisations. It was really interesting that Neil went on before me because some of the stuff that he's talking about in terms of what does talent actually look like, we very much cover in the book. In fact, Neil's actually a case study in the book. So how we look very carefully to say, how does this notion of employee experience, how can you use it for competitive advantage? And what are the really smart companies doing in this sector? So we came up with this. So this is the new talent journey. This is distilled from looking at what lots of smart organisations and recruiters are doing around the world to create this holistic, joined up employee experience that will help them attract, retain and develop exceptional talent within their organisations. So the stages are, and I'll go through them in a little bit more detail in a second: attention, attraction, acquisition, onboarding, development and retention. So what's interesting, in all of these areas, there's lots of innovation going on. There's lots of new technologies and new ways of thinking. And what I've noticed in the past is all of these will be discussed at different conferences and different events. You wouldn't talk about learning and development at a recruitment conference, and you wouldn't talk about recruitment at a learning and development conference. And this is where I think we're going wrong, because all of this is joined up. In terms of the employee experience, it's all one thing. We experience it as a journey. So let me take you through some of these stages and just highlight some of the innovations and some of the things that are going on. So first of all, talent attention. To me, this is the single biggest issue that we have as an industry. How do you get the attention of the people that you want to recruit for your business? How do you get their attention, on their smartphones, away from their smartphones? There's so much information out there. There's so much going on. How do you sort of catch someone's eye so you can tell them about your company and what it's like to work there? Now, there are a number of ways of doing this. Employer brand, very, very important here. Micro-targeting your actual message, and your message itself are all real key things. So attention, to me, is the biggest challenge of our age as recruiters. Next, attraction. Once you've got someone's attention, how do you actually persuade them to join your organisation? Now, for those recruiters in the room, you're professional persuaders. This is what you do as a job, persuading people that they should leave one organisation and join another. What I think the challenge is, there's now technology that facilitates doing that at scale. If you remember back to Johnny's presentation this morning, he was talking about lead nurturing and all kinds of marketing automation that we're seeing moving into recruitment. Now, I would suggest that the skill of using technology to persuade people to join your organisation at scale is the key skill of the next 2 or 3 years. It's the key thing to think about in terms of how do you bring that skill into your organisation, or how do you upskill people to make sure they can do that. Thirdly, acquisition. How do you actually make sure you're selecting the right people? Giving those people a great candidate experience. A candidate experience is a subset of employee experience. Just because that person hasn't become an employee yet, that doesn't mean the employee experience hasn't started. So focusing on candidate experience, focusing on some of the interesting and developing ways of selecting people I think is a really interesting area. Next up, onboarding. How do you use technology to make onboarding a seamless journey for people? How do you get people to hit the ground sprinting? Because that's what we have to do these days. In the fast-moving business world we live in, everything's agile, everything's quick. We need people up to speed on day one and sprinting. And also, we need to reinforce to people that they've made the right decision to join our company. Very, very critical to make sure that we retain them and they stay. Next up, development. Again, in Johnny's presentation this morning, he was talking about micro-learning and macro-learning, and I won't go too much into it, but obviously there are lots and lots of different ways that we can develop ourselves and develop our careers these days. And it's something that employers need to be very, very mindful of to make sure they're facilitating that. And also things like internal mobility, learning from different parts of the organisation, absolutely critical. Next up, retention. Giving people a great employee experience is a way of retaining them. We know that people don't stay in jobs anymore. People are constantly on the lookout for their next move, their next gig. How do you retain them in your organisation? And this is about mentally re-recruiting them constantly to make sure that those right people stay in your organisation. And then finally, when they leave, what we find is this process is actually cyclical. It's a journey with no ending. When someone leaves, you could hire them again in the future. In the US, they're pretty good at doing this. They call this boomerang hires. In the UK, not so much. We're not so good at keeping in touch with people and getting them to rejoin the organisation when they've got, possibly more skills and more experiences. But even if those people aren't rejoining the organisation, having them as advocates for your employer brand because you've off-boarded them in an appropriate way is critical, because we come back to getting people's attention and referrals and all that kind of stuff. So I hope you can see that the talent journey is kind of critical here. And to finish with, I really want to give you guys a challenge. Now, as recruiters and people involved in recruitment, you're probably just looking at the first three segments. So attention, attraction, and acquisition. But you should be looking at the whole thing because they all feed into each other. What is the point of recruiting someone who's brilliant who doesn't stay because they weren't onboarded properly, or they weren't developed, or they weren't retained? So my challenge to you is to go back to your organizations, look at your talent journey, think about the parts that you control, think about what you can understand, learn, and optimize, and also think about the parts that you can influence. Because the only way you're going to attract exceptional talent to your organization is by having an exceptional talent journey. Thank you.